Hi, welcome to the Daydreams of Quilts YouTube channel. Today is video 4 in our 4-part video series making our frog pond quilt tutorial. So if you're just finding us today, make sure to go back and watch the other 3 videos for how to put your quilt together, because today we are finishing our quilt with the binding. So I'm going to teach you how to make binding and how to attach the binding, and there will be 2 different methods I'll show you. Hand binding and machine binding. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so we need to get all of the little threads that are left trimmed off. My Juki will knot off my threads on the back, so I just trim them. Some people pull them through to the back by pulling on the corresponding thread on the back. They pull the front thread through and tie off, but my machine ties off for me. Even if you just do a small little back stitch at the beginning and end of each stitch line that you're starting, you should be okay. Not have your quilting come out. So we're going to need to trim all of these little threads off, and that's especially important on a quilt that people will be sleeping with, especially babies, because you don't want to get those little threads wrapped around little baby fingers and toes, or even adult fingers and toes. So that's kind of a safety thing there. And then we need to trim off the excess batting and backing. So what I do here is I line up one of my ruler lines with the edge of my border where it meets the quilt top. So we've got a pretty straight seam here. So I line up one of my lines here, and then I cut with the rotary cutter, and I just keep moving my quilt up here on my mat and cutting that way. You can also do this with just regular scissors, but I think it's easier to get squared up and straight with the ruler and the rotary cutter. And I also am all about saving time, because I do make quilts to sell, and I really need to not take too long on them, or I wind up getting paid like $1 an hour or something. So here you can see I'm going to square up right here, and there's a little bit of excess here. So I'm going to just cut like that and have it nice and square here on the corner. So I'm going to go all around the quilt and trim, and then we will talk about binding. Okay, so I have some 2.5-inch strips here that I've cut off of a fat quarter, and I don't think I had quite enough, so I cut a little bit more off, so my binding's going to be a little bit scrappy. But these were the lighter fabrics in the first video that I decided not to use in the quilt top. So to make binding, you're going to have one piece of fabric like this, and you're going to put the other piece face down at a right angle. And you're going to have a 1/4 inch sticking out from the top and a 1/4 inch sticking out from the side here. And you're going to sew right from this corner down to this corner. And then you're going to trim a 1/4 inch from that with your ruler. So I'm going to sew these all together, and then we'll go to the cutting table and trim them. Okay, so we have all our strips sewn together, and the easiest thing to do would be to have long width of fabric strips, and then you'd only need like 4 or 5. But I'm using what I have and trying to use up some fabrics. So I have a bunch of shorter strips cut off of fat quarters. And so what we're going to do is place the 1/4 inch line on our ruler right on that seam that we just sewed from corner to corner, and trim off this leftover stuff. So then we're going to have a nice strip like this. So we just go all the way down the strip and trim all of those extra little corners off. So if you're using longer strips, you would just have four seams to trim. Okay, so now we just need to press all of those seams to one side, and we're ready to finish our binding and get it on the quilt. Okay, so now to finish making the binding, we're just going to fold it in half and press the whole length of the strip. And that's it. That's how you make binding. So now we're ready to attach it to the front of our quilt. I'm going to attach my binding now, and I'm starting with the little extra piece of different fabric so that I don't have just a little 5-inch piece at the end and it looks like I ran out of binding, and I would like to make it look like it was intentional to have one corner a little different here. So you're going to want to leave a little bit, like say 3 or 4 inches unsewn, so that when you get back around and you need to join it together, you'll have enough free fabric to do that. And this is sewn with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm using a 1/4 inch foot that has a guide on it to put the edge of my quilt up against. And you just sew all the way around. I'll tell you what to do when we get to the corners. So when you get to the corner, you want to stop a 1/4 inch from the end and back stitch like 2 or 3 stitches. Take your quilt off the machine and turn it. Then you're going to fold your binding up so you have like a 45-degree angle here, and then fold your binding back down over that. So it looks like a square here, but you've got a 45 under here that you can't see now. And you just put it back under your presser foot and back stitch at the beginning of it. And just sew all the way down the next side. Okay, so stop 1/4 inch from the end and back stitch. And I should mention too, if you want to trim off these little dog-eared corners, you can. I don't ever bother, but if they're getting in your way when you're sewing, you can. And I have left not quite 1/4 inch, so I'm just going to pop 1 stitch here so that I can do my fold. So again, you're going to fold up and make this 45-degree line, and then fold back down over that. Put it back under your presser foot and back stitch, and then continue down the next side. So you do that for all 4 corners, and then I'll show you how we join it when we get to the other end. Okay, to join these 2 ends together, I left a tail here that's unsewn, just like I did at the beginning. So you're just going to bring those 2 ends together, and then open them up because they're folded, right? So open up the fold, and then I put a wonder clip right here where they are butting up against each other. And I've got a little bit too much of a tail here, so I'm going to cut that off. Okay, then you are going to just flip your quilt up on your work surface so that it's out of your way. Get these nice and flat against each other, and then get them over here under your presser foot. So I just look at where the edge of this wonder clip is, and line it up with the center of my presser foot, and then just sew a seam straight down. Okay, and there's other ways to do this where you can have a mitered seam, but this is the easiest way, and this is the way that I usually do it. So then you're just going to trim with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then just finish sewing the rest of your seam back to where you started. Okay, so it's all attached. Now we just need to flip it around to the back, and I'm going to be machine binding this baby quilt, so I'm going to show you how I get that all set up. I mean, you can do this for hand binding too. I don't do this for myself for hand binding, but you certainly can. If I'm hand binding, I just tuck and fold as I go. But for machine binding, I want to have it all ready to go. So what you want to do is tuck your edge of your quilt up into your binding and fold down so that the seam is covered, this little seam from sewing it onto the front, and then put a wonder clip there to hold it. And that's why I have so many wonder clips, because I like to get the whole edge of the quilt folded and clipped before I start machine binding it. But if you don't have that many wonder clips, you can just sew until you run out of clips, and then stop, take it off the machine and clip some more, and then put it back on and sew some more. So I'm going to go all the way around. Okay, so when you get to the corner, you want to snug that quilt up into the corner and then fold back down with the next edge, the next side of the quilt, so that you have a nice 45-degree mitered corner there. And stick a clip on it to hold it, and then keep going. And you would do the same for hand binding. And then just keep going all the way around the quilt.